All right, good afternoon. Welcome to California Community Power Board meeting, January 17th. I'm calling the meeting to order. I'll ask our General Counsel, Brittany Isles, to verify meeting quorum.
I can verify that there is a quorum present.
Thank you. I have not been notified of any matters subsequent to posting the agenda. So I'll move to item 4, which is public comment. Any members of the public may address the board concerning matters not on the agenda. I'll wait to see if you have any hands up from the public. I don't see any. So I'll go to consent calendar, item 5. We have the minutes. If we don't have anyone from the board wanting to remove it from the consent, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I do have one correction, please. The spelling of my name. That's all.
Ooh. Okay. Noted. And Director Seifers, would you like to make a motion with that amendment?
Yes, I'll move the item.
Thank you. Second. And seconded by Director Shaw. All right, roll call, please, General Counsel Isles.
Can we just confirm whether there are any public comments on
Right.
the minute?
Public comment? I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
Let's take a vote on this.
Okay. Ava Community Energy, absent. Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority is absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy is absent. Thank you. The minutes pass.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 6 and the board report. This is about 2024 board officer elections. At the last meeting, I had asked if anyone was interested to please get in touch with me and our general counsel. I've heard from 4 individuals who would like to serve as officers. For chair, Jeff Seifers, Director Seifers. For vice chair, Director Mitchell. For secretary, Director Shaw, and treasurer controller, Director Sears. We'll be, after discussion, I'll entertain 2 motions. We'd like to vote on the resolutions in item 6A and 6B separately. But before we do that, let me ask the board members if there's any questions or discussion. And you're welcome to, you can have nominations from the floor also. All right, not seeing any. Let's ask if there's any public comment. I don't see any hands raised. So we'll bring it back to the board and we are going to vote on resolution 240101 for election of CC Power chair and vice chair. Director Seifers and Director Mitchell respectively. General Counsel Isles, could we take a vote, please?
Did we get a motion and a second on that?
Oops, sorry, I guess that would help, huh?
Yeah.
I would move.
Barbara Hale moving. Oh, I'll second Mr. Shaw's motion.
Okay, thanks for that correction. So we got the motion and the second.
Perfect. For resolution 240101, electing Director Seifers as chair and Director Mitchell as vice chair. Ava Community Energy, absent. Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority, absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy is absent. Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you. I'll conduct the meeting for the next item and then hand it over to Chair Cyphers. So I'd like a motion on resolution 240102, appointment of secretary and treasurer controller.
So moved.
Director Marshall,
Sonoma can second.
Director Cyphers. All right. See if there's any discussion from the board. Not seeing any attendees, public participation. Don't see any hands raised. So we have a motion and a second. Can we take a vote, please?
For resolution 240102, appointing Director Shaw as secretary and Director Steers as treasurer and controller. Ava Community Energy is absent. Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority is absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy is absent. Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you. I'm handing over the virtual gavel to Director Cyphers.
Thank you, Director Balachandran, and thank you all. Happy to be back in this seat. So let's see, we're moving to item 6C, and this is formally adopting our regular meeting dates for 2024 with a resolution. And General Manager Morris, do you have anything to say about this? I think it kind of speaks for itself, but if you want to say anything about it, let us know.
Just really quickly, we're just, we try to cancel the meetings we don't need. What we're doing is adjusting the dates for 3 months of meeting where we know there's a conflict. So we're just shifting from the 3rd Wednesday of the month to the 4th Wednesday of the month for February, April, and June. And recommend you do this, and then we'll still cancel those meetings if we don't need them. Thank you.
Sounds good. Is there any questions or comments from the board? Not seeing any. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Silicon Valley and Peninsula, and let's check for public comment. If anybody wishes to make a comment, you can use the raise hand feature. Not seeing any on that. So on a resolution, Brittany, are we allowed to ask if there's any opposition, or should we do a roll call?
Roll call.
Okay, we're ready to do it.
Okay, for resolution 240103, Ava Community Energy is absent. Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority is absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes,
and Valley Clean Energy is absent. Thank you. The resolution passes.
thank you. So we'll move on to 6D and the general manager report. Why don't you take this, General Manager Morris?
Thank you, new Chair Cyphers, and thank you, erstwhile Chair Balachandran, for all your service. Thank you very much. Look forward to working with everybody. So I had some quick updates today, and then we'll head into one more voting item. But I wanted to start with a little fun because CC Power has been active with a few bulk buys, and so we got a couple information services on behalf of the members, and hopefully those are working out. So on the next slide, and everybody has to not cheat. We have a couple trivia items to warm you up and get you guys sort of reconnected to the larger progress CCAs are making. So question number 1, and this comes from Wood Mackenzie's service, which, as you know, we just purchased through the bulk buy. What percentage of utility scale energy storage was installed in California basically over the 12-month period from 2022 to 2023 Q2? And how many megawatts? Without cheating, does anyone have any guesses? And the answers are cleverly inverted at the bottom, so try not to look there. Okay, anyone brave enough to guess here in this public meeting?
Not to look is a recipe for looking.
No, it's like how big of a purple elephant, right? Yeah, well, so storage, as you guys know, is really a lot of activity in California. So 58% of the nationwide storage was deployed in California utility scale, amounting to 2,450 megawatts. So going back 10 years when AB 2514 passed, the whole statewide target across the three investor-owned utilities was 1,325 megawatts. So within a 12-month period, basically doubled that. So pretty neat. And then looking at the solar side, how much utility scale solar was added in 2023 in gigawatts. So these are big numbers. So I was excited to share this, and thanks to Philippe for helping us find some good tidbits here. Any guesses?
To clarify, this is US-wide utility scale solar.
Okay. We'll be fast here. Okay, so the total was 23 gigawatts. So 23,000 megawatts of solar were installed in a 12-month period. And that was up from 11,000 or 12,000 megawatts the year prior. And of course, there's been a steady increase. The year 2022 was an odd year where there was probably impacts of supply chain and other effects rippling through the market. But still, I think the big takeaway is 23 gigawatts last year. And then sort of looking ahead, September, how many gigawatts of net qualifying capacity is expected to be available for the CAISO grid, including imports? Any guesses?
Barely enough. That's my
Barely
guess.
enough is actually the correct guess. Really well done, Chair Cyphers. So per the the Gridwell report, over 56 gigawatts are expected to be available, which is sort of just enough. And also, when we say just enough, it may depend also on the implementation of slice of day, because 56 gigawatts is a general number, but you actually look at the availability by hours, and it starts to get a little more complicated. So even though so much capacity has been installed, it kind of shows that we're still just keeping up. So with that, let's move on. Hopefully, we can get to some other work items here. Just really quickly, in December 2023, the only contract we signed was the WoodMac Information Service, and that we wanted to disclose here. And going forward, working with our general counsel, we won't disclose items that were signed pursuant to the authorized budgets or authorized resolutions. This was a resolution that was passed in December, so we'll do that. We'll slightly modify how we present this at the next board meeting. And Amy, let's move on. And interrupt anytime if you have questions. Chair Cyphers has also been the more recent treasurer, and we're going to work together, and then I'll work with Mitch going forward on presenting financials in a way that really gives the board the visibility and control that I think is appropriate. We do work with the Mara accounting, and so we wanted to just share with you that we are producing annual quarterly financials. These are unofficial financials, not audited, in which we do once a year. But what it shows is sort of on the next slide. I know it's hard to see that one. Is that we're spending according to plan, and we're going to build out how you can see the end of the year forecast, so you know where we're going to land, where we reasonably expect to land at the end of the year. But the main categories of revenue, and then under expenses, the staff and service providers, the operations bucket, and then what we call project flow throughs are all sort of heading on pace. So everything's on track, and then also on track would be the building of reserves, which was part of the budgetary plan for this fiscal year. Any questions on financials? Okay, great. And then something I'm really excited about is to start on a strategic planning exercise with everybody. So Amy, we can jump to the next slide. Strategic planning to me is very important because as our board, we want to make sure we're targeting work that works for you. And if we go through a clear enough strategic planning exercise, it helps CC Power execute on your behalf without needing to always touch base with you too much. So this strategic planning will link back to the original strategic plan CC Power adopted in December of 2022, and it will involve a refresh of that. You'll recall that what that looked like was a kind of 3-year look of growing the capabilities of CC Power and gradually structuring ways we could add value for you all. So looking ahead to 2024, 2025, what we wanted to do over the next few months was connect or reconnect with all of the members on strategic planning. We plan to do this through interviews and really just meetings with you, face-to-face meetings if we can schedule them, and focus in on what your needs are and what your priorities are. We'll take that and develop a work plan and also some draft updates to the strategic plan that highlights the larger arc of where we want to take this organization. And then we'll build sort of a budget in line with that would be brought back to the board before the end of this fiscal year. So a little more detail on that process on the next slide. We can see the first step is these member interviews. Now, some of these interviews are already underway, particularly at the procurement staff level. So we also wanted to check in with the board and then with additional working groups, related staff, programs, or operational staff. So we'll be doing that and trying to schedule that. And Philippe and I, if possible, do want to try and meet in person, or would like to come meet with you guys and your teams. And then we'll start to turn that into the work product and the work plan in March and April. Sometimes I may call this an attack plan, which is really sort of where we're going to prioritize and what we want to get done. But additionally, mapping out that larger 3-year trajectory so everybody's aligned on where we think we're heading. And then lastly, in May and June, we'll be coming back to you with a final semi-finalized work plan and related budget proposals. I know on the budget side, many of you may already be in your budget cycle, our planning process. And so if there's any information I can get you sooner rather than later, let me know. Otherwise, we're heading towards kind of giving everybody sort of final or near final budget information in May. But again, I could probably start to estimate things a little bit sooner if preliminary information will help you. And then we can jump to the next slide, please, Amy. Again, so we would just want your blessing. We're going to be bugging you and scheduling time, and we look forward to connecting with everyone. And ideally, we're happy to come visit you in your offices, or meet with your teams, or do whatever makes sense for us to get the right information and direction from you. Okay. All right, Chair Cyphers, that wraps up the GM report.
Sounds good. Is there any further board questions or input on this one? All right, I will turn to the public. Anybody wishing to make a comment on this item? Seeing no hands, let's move on to a fun item. Not that wasn't. Item 6E. So staff are looking for authorization not to exceed up to 440,000 to explore, analyze, and potentially pursue project ownership options of energy storage and/or solar plus storage projects using build own transfer technique. So, General Manager Morris, why don't you say a bit more about this one?
Absolutely. Amy, when you're ready, we do have supporting discussion slides as well to help folks. So what's before you now, as Chair Cyphers indicated, is Resolution 240104, which would approve CC Power to explore and solicit for build own transfer projects. We are summarizing the title of this. There's a lot more that goes into this, and we'll share some of the scope of work we have, what the not to exceed would be, et cetera. And I just want to remind people, no one is committed at this time. What this resolution does is it gives us the authorization, if members are interested, at the applicable price points. We do have information, having worked extensively with the Resource Planning Working Group, that there's probably sufficient interest for us to move forward here. But given the timing of when the Resource Planning Working Group meets, we wanted to come to the board today. So stepping back, in this CC Power strategic plan, and listed as a priority for many of the members, is to look at and understand opportunities related to the Inflation Reduction Act. As you know, One of the key provisions in there is a direct pay provision that relates to municipal entity ownership. It's a, you know, significant form of value, and everybody wanted to understand really how does it translate to project value compared to alternatives. So once we've modeled it, what we saw was there is significant value here in the build own transfer with direct pay. It's always going to be compared against a PPA or a PPA and prepay. And there is a lot of noise in these calculations. And so knowing that on paper, there's significant value here, we thought that was significant. And then we wanted to also look at these other strategic benefits that may be available through a build own transfer. So we can go to the next slide. And so knowing we have something that is, you know, perhaps at the same cost or cheaper than a PPA, what other values would come along with trying to pursue this path, which would be different. And we know that there's some pretty significant credit and financial strengthening benefits. There's the ownership experience. There's creating this option and an alternative path to a PPA, which could inherently be value. There's also certainly non-zero value in the end of project life, where you might own the interconnection or the land. And then also creating this alternative path to PPAs, given that there's potentially some uncertainty in how the PPA market navigates the next few years, where there's going to be significant tax equity being issued by so many projects around the United States. There's some other accounting issues with called Basel III and also these California conformity rules. So for those reasons, we sort of group that as just strategic benefit, where if you go down the build own transfer path, you may be able to sidestep some gyrations in the PPA market if you're in the if you're buying at that time. So I wanted to just share my personal views are that, you know, having looked at this and talked to many experts outside and also with you guys, and understanding that there may be additional procurement you're interested in. What seems logical is to authorize this because it really gets you good information, but it's actually not that binding. So what this does is it starts you on the path of getting information on build own transfers, but also comparing them against PPAs. And so it really puts you in the position to decide if something's relevant. It gives you more information to really look at the financial implications involved with issuing debt and how that would work or fit with your organization. But it would not be in this stage of the process that you have to decide. It would really be after the end of this stage of the process that you would have to decide if you want to further pursue build own transfer. What this does is really just get us to a short list of projects. So next step. I'm sorry, next slide. Yeah, so we've really been in phase one, where we've been doing the diligence, exploring this, working with the members, primarily the resource planning working group. And now we're looking at phase 2A, which goes from competitive solicitation down to a short list. This is not the most straightforward solicitation. We do want to have it be quite wide open, so we get an array of bids and different technologies, although we will be focusing on solar plus storage and standalone storage. Even designing some of the contractual forms would be sort of new, because we're looking at a build own transfer agreement. So getting through that will be, I think, valuable for all of us in learning and building the templates. And then it's really at the end of phase 2A that things to me look a lot more serious in the decision making, the dollars at stake, and the sort of obligations associated with it become much more material. And that was what we're calling phase 2B. And phase 2B is where only interested members would opt in to finalize negotiations and actually pursue some outcome from the RFP. So I'm happy to keep going, Chair Cyphers, but I do want to make sure everybody has a really clear grasp on that. So let me know if you want to field questions in the middle or keep going.
Let's check. Are there any questions so far?
One question.
Yep, Director Marshall. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Alex, too, for checking in prior to the board meeting on this. I had a good chance to check in with Roy. our Power Services Director. So I just had a couple clarification questions here. So ultimately, these would be for ownership of projects with a sort of a 20-year ownership span, or has that been identified?
That has not been identified. So early in the phase 2A, only for the interested parties that are participating, we would have I think a significant amount of work. We would probably do it through a project advisory subcommittee to really tailor the solicitation to the members who are participating. One of the challenges was we know a lot of members might be interested, but it's not until they opt into the phase 2A that we want to give them control of that. And we have a picture in a moment of sort of some of the duties of that phase 2A group or project advisory subcommittee.
Okay, cool. And then just a quick follow-on would be that in phase 2A, would the purpose of that be to identify a short list of actual projects that we would then move into 2B,
Exactly. Yes.
more direct path? And so, and I know you said that was predominantly solar plus storage combination, or are we agnostic at this point whether or not that might be bifurcated?
So I think just having spoken with a lot of members, again, I don't know who's going to opt in yet, but it seems like there's a couple different views here. One is that we want to keep execution risk low. So having the more straightforward technology and project may fit with some members' interests. To me, that would look like a solar plus storage project, or maybe a lithium ion standalone storage. That said, we've also heard from some members who may want to look to augment their portfolio in certain ways. They may not want more solar. And so what that may look like is that we have some members who want a solar plus storage project and some who want a standalone storage. And we actually have seen from the past solicitations like long duration storage that some members opt in and some don't. And
Yep.
so it may be that there's 2 projects members want to pursue from this short list. I'm not totally sure. And again, we want to give a lot of control to the members who opt into this phase 2A to control what we're selecting for in the solicitation.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Great questions.
Director
Hill.
Hill.
Sorry.
Thank you. I just, I'm enthusiastic and interested in this effort. I'm wondering about how you're threading the needle between spending a lot of time on contract language, templates, before finding out whether we're really going to do this. And, in order to know if we're really going to do this, we have to get meaningful responses from the commercial community. So that kind of says more detail at the front end is better if you want something more meaningful at the other end. Just wondering if you could talk to that challenge, that balance between, getting something out there, getting good information back, keeping us on pace so that we make progress, but not spending a lot of time and money at the front end where we never advance to another phase.
I really hear you, Director Hale. We are trying to thread that needle, and you'll see that we have a very wide range of possible low versus high costs for this phase 2A. And I think we're trying to have it so there's the right amount of control for the participating members. What we have talked to a lot of developers. So a lot of the developers do know this is coming, and we're sort of reasonably certain that we'll see some level of healthy participation. And on top of that, we've also met with a lot of different possible councils we might use to help us with specific document drafting and things like that. And so, build own transfers fortunately are not totally novel. This is a procurement model that's been used a lot, although not so much in California over the last 15, 20 years. So some of the councils we've talked to already sort of have pro forma documents, and there's ways we could kind of use existing material to quickly and hopefully inexpensively get this up and running. And then what we're trying to do again is have something sufficient enough for the solicitation so that it's successful, but then really it's phase 2B where you have much more significant costs, particularly on the bond issuance side and the financial diligence. So, and some of those costs actually can get rolled into the bond issuance. So we think there's enough of a strategy here to manage costs tightly in the phase 2A, and then really see who's interested in the phase 2B. And again, we would want to be very careful in the phase 2B as well, but you have that pathway where you can roll costs into the bond so that from a cash flow standpoint, it's manageable near term.
And then that's helpful. Thank you. And then how are you thinking this will roll out with the progress that's being made on the workforce environment and environmental justice topic? Follow up on the workshop.
Great question. Chair Cyphers, do you want me to try to
I
respond?
think we have, I think the ad hoc committee is gearing up to, digest everything and bring back ideas to the board. And I think the timeline on this process will be such that we'll be able to apply the lessons we've learned. That's my hunch anyway, and my hope that we're not gonna have another procurement cycle without having attended to that topic. So, or certainly not decisions that are leading to finalizing contracts and making purchase decisions. Maybe some of these early steps would happen before, but I think that the early steps in my hunch are going to be much more exploratory and about trying to get baseline information. And so anyway, I don't see that as a conflict, but I think it's a good question to hold in our minds as we go forward.
Well, and I think that there could be contract terms that would be influenced by what the ad hoc
Yes.
committee comes out with. So,
Yes. Yep.
but I'm feeling good about the statement that you said you wouldn't expect we'd have another procurement cycle without having matured that committee effort. So thank you.
Super. I saw a few hands, but I'm down to Silicon Valley or 3CE. So you have to choose whose comment this is.
I have a couple of comments or questions. Thank you, Chair Cyphers, and thank you, General Manager Morris. I think your question regarding sort of the planning and the budget helped shed some light on that rather broad cost estimate between your low and high estimate. So I appreciate that thinking. I would also sort of appreciate sort of as you make those procurement decisions around what council you're going to engage and other things that you share that with board members so that we know who our team is. The other thing is you start looking at whether it's standalone storage or other technologies, I would encourage as part of this process in 2A to think about the liabilities in development and in O&M that you're effectively shifting. It may change with different technologies, it may not, but by quantifying those liabilities and understanding where they are and ensuring that either through the contract documents, through your project team, that you're able to address them. Because I'll be very interested when it comes back to the next phase, what is our plan for addressing those liabilities that we would be taking on either in development or O&M associated with the different technologies. So less of a question there, more of just a statement and a hope that, as we develop those recommendations that you'll be looking at them as staff.
Yeah, and those questions, Director Shaw, are really foremost in my mind as well. How do we manage risks and do this as smartly as possible while building experience? I think it is a good fit for CC Power in that it's, we're sharing the risk, and this kind of highlights that potential preference towards really limiting execution risk as much as possible. Our Director of Origination, Philippe Gerritsen, has been, discussing strategies here a lot with these law firms he's been interviewing sort of preliminarily to look at who we might want to work with if we do this. So Philippe, anything you thought to add in response there about risk management?
Yeah, the way that Alex has really touched upon this. We're looking to focus minimizing risk as far as technology is concerned, be able to leverage the expertise of the development teams as well as the law firms and hiring an owner's engineer to represent our interests throughout this process so that we're aware and cognizant of where we need to have visibility and control over the development process, what kind of considerations we need to take into operations, and how we need to account for end of life as well for these assets so that we have a full life cycle view of what our potential risk exposure is and what the likely economics might look like over the entire life of this asset. So as we go forward with the members and evaluate these different technologies, we will have to account for the diversity of different resources that may bid to us as we develop these pro forma agreements. That is one potential area where costs could increase somewhat in considering these different resources that are available. But again, that's something that we want to navigate and make sure that we are representing the desires of the members and ultimately coming forward with a final product that can be leveraged by each of the members for their own procurement efforts into the future or for continued procurement efforts on behalf of by CC Power on behalf of the members.
Welcome Treasurer Sears. And I also see that Director Hale's got her hand back up.
Just a quick follow-up to that. I really appreciate Philippe and Alex, both of you, being able to articulate that plan. I wanted to add 2 additional thoughts around those development risks that we would be taking on.
Okay.
Obviously, zoning, permitting, that process. The second one is the community engagement, meaningful community engagement around siting projects. So those tend to be time intensive. They're not always the big money intensive operational engineering, but critically important as you think through those.
Great feedback, and certainly would be addressed in the kind of early stages of phase 2A when we formulate our plans for how we'll select projects.
So I think it's my turn, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to amplify what Director Shaw said. I agreed with everything he was saying. I was pleased to hear, Mr. Gerritsen, that you have an intention to engage an owner's engineer. I think that'll be an important aspect of prudently moving forward, assuming we do. And I'm hearing a lot of different research is happening. I haven't heard if any research is happening with public agency implementation of build own transfer. There might be some good lessons learned out there. I'd be happy to help identify folks who might be able to share information from the public power community outside of California. You're saying that California doesn't have a lot of experience with BOT, but I'd be happy to help connect you with folks who may be able to share from some lessons learned from their experience as a public agency.
Oh, great point, Director Hale. Yeah, certainly I was focused on the power plant side, but probably from a build own transfer standpoint, there's a lot of good cases out there and networks we may have that could help us here. We have focused a lot on connecting with SCAPA and NCPA to kind of get a sense of how they've approached these situations. We know that they're currently are likely to be active in this area as well. And then also there's possibilities of sort of building off of templates they have.
Go to Director Marshall.
Yes, thank you. I just, through the discussion, was wondering if there is already consideration that would be baked into the solicitation around sort of status of interconnection or place in line. Is that going to be a requirement? Since the wait time is, I think, what you guys say, around 7 years or something now. So I'm curious, like, how would we position that? Do you know yet?
That would be something we start to consider early in phase 2A, where we specifically say, how are we going to filter bids? What are the requirements on sort of eligible or conforming bids? I do think this does link to the timelines that the members who participate will face. When do they need new capacity online? And again, under the high case, what Philippe and I have worked with members on is developing a sort of really expansive solicitation where we can gather a ton of information and try and process it and develop smart recommendations from that. Alternatively, if we scope it more narrowly, we could probably do things faster and sort of simpler, but we may restrict the bids we see. So that'll be a question faced by the project advisory subcommittee as they design the solicitation to meet their needs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Put myself in queue. I think my request is, as we go through this process, I'd like to also have staff to staff training or lessons learned about build own transfer generally as we go along. I'm always comparing whether it's most efficient to procure through CC Power or to procure individually. And I see a value add to me as a member of getting some of the lessons that could help me make those choices. And even with this process. So I think that's a value that CC Power could provide. So I wanted to make that request.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought that up. I think one of the sort of non-quantified values here is all the learning.
Yeah.
Really building everybody's ability to have this book open to them if they want. It may force bring more competition into the market in a productive way, and give everybody more options. Looking at what we understand some of the agencies like NCPA or SCAPA will do is they may have sites in member territory that they want to own for their own sort of other purposes aside just from power generation. So there's a lot of optionality that comes with it, and I do expect we'll be facing a steep learning curve. We do have some strategies for mitigating that learning curve, really recognizing that we're going to need help, and you'll see that when we bring up the budget here in just a moment.
Okay. So
Okay.
do you have more to the presentation or should we?
Yeah, just a couple quick slides. I'll be fast here. Thanks, everybody. So on slide 13 is the benefits of a phase 2A. So again, we've talked it through, but once we know who's going to participate, if anyone, that group will really control a lot of how we solicit, what we're soliciting for, and what that looks like. So there's a bunch of steps that would go into this 2A. Building the documents, building the valuation model, working with the solicitation management firm to select for what we want. And we'd also be soliciting for comparative pricing under PPAs. So everybody who's interested in buying would get fresh information on what's available in the market, not just from a BOT standpoint, but on the PPA side or toll side as well. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see some of our sort of risk management strategies here. Many of you have teams that run solicitation, or you all have teams that run solicitations. This is a bit different though, of course, right? We really want to get the right learning and reduce risk. Part of that is going to be on the structuring the solicitation smartly and having advisors that can help us. And so you see something different here. The engineering support is someone who's really going to help us evaluate the sort of technical project feasibility and the interconnection viability of projects. That's helping us manage those risks, whereas historically they haven't been a risk that you really worry as much about because that risk is placed on the developer. We also know that contracts are evolving currently across the US to address the direct pay benefits. And so more and more developers are being able to address contract provisions where they take on domestic content and related direct pay compliance in their work. So it's still the developer who's using their expertise to develop. They just have these additional layers related to the direct pay provision. And then one last thing is on the build transfer council side and the bond issuance side, this is a bit different. And so we would have some extra funds not to exceed here so that we can really have a strong confidence that when we do get our short list, we know it's effective and workable for us and going to lead to the right outcome. So a good example is what's the overall cost of a project that parties can bear from a credit rating standpoint. So we want to work and iterate with bond counsel on understanding the right credit, the sort of optimal credit mix we could get and how much we could allocate to any one member in a way that manages the credit risk as well as we can. So those will be some of the sort of additional strategies that get woven into the shortlisting process here. What you see is sort of on the low end, not to exceed 135, on the high end of 440,000. If there are, say, 6 members, the high side would be 73,000 versus 22,500. And so I know that's a large window. The purpose here, though, I think what guided some of these recommendations is that we want to have the not to exceed we want to manage costs tightly, but we really want to do a good job, given that the goals are building capability, learning, and setting us up for success. So that's why we have this phase 2A high, and we do think that'll be sufficient. And we didn't also want to have a situation where we had to come back to the members for an additional sort of request and raise. So we think the 440 is appropriate. And again, this is authorizing this expense if members opt in. We don't know, it's not official who would opt in, but we would give them until the end of the month to make that decision. So lastly, you see the next steps. And this is sort of like really our working list here. We'll have the project participation share. We'll establish the project advisory subcommittee with the participating members. We'll scope the procurement. We'll also keep an eye on the CPUC's IRP for sort of any new requirements or online dates or extensions. And then we'll be iterating with the participating members on sort of preferences for their portfolio. Working with Braun Blazing, we've already been setting this up that we're going to want their help to select BTA counsel and then get the owner's engineer and the solicitation provider. We've talked to a bunch of those folks as well. And then, we'll get the tools up and running and get the pro forma agreements, start to talk with the banks about the bond financing piece and what would be a limitation, how we would structure it. And this is I just want to focus on that for a second. There's certain ways that SCAPA has sort of worked with Wall Street and banks to treat bond as an operating expense. That's actually very favorable because it makes sure that the bond gets lower. It's a more competitive rate. So we want to make sure that we're treated similarly. So there may be some education and work with different banks there. And then in the end, we would sort of run the solicitation. So I'm happy to answer more questions. I know this is probably a lot, and you do have a memo in the packet further explaining it. And at this time, I welcome any discussion, Chair Cyphers and Philippe and I are at everyone's service if there's any further clarifications we can offer.
Let's do that. I'm seeing a couple hands, so let's go to Director Marshall.
I'll just be quick and say that I think this is very exciting. I think you've structured it well in 2A and 2B, just to give us a little time to digest what we've heard and then make a larger investment if it makes sense. And to me, this is like right in the bullseye of why CC Power was created. So good for you for putting it together, and hopefully it works for the rest.
Thank you. Let's go to Director Sears.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Philippe, for putting together the information. Can we go back to the budget slide? It shows the two sort of the high and low options.
Certainly, we'll bring that up.
Great. And apologies for being late. Perhaps this part of the conversation already happened, but I wanted to just make sure we understood. We're being asked today to act on the high estimate.
Yeah, so what's in the resolution was to approve up to the not to exceed of 440. So it's the high estimate. There's a little bit of language in the resolution about how we're going to try to manage costs and work through, really pursuant to the direction of the project advisory subcommittee. And there's still a chance that there is an interest here. So what this does is it authorizes us to do this if the members opt in. And depending on how many opt in, the prices would change, be higher or lower.
Yeah, and this assumes 6 participants, which I think
Yeah,
is
we
probably.
just gave you that as an example. We do have
Sure.
sort of informal polls that indicate we probably have at least 6 members who might want to participate, maybe more. So I wanted to share that information, but again, we haven't really, no one's been forced to commit in any way. And so we'll give folks until the end of the month to go through their internal process to decide if they want to join.
Great, yeah, and so from our perspective, being on the smaller side, sort of representing that viewpoint, I won't speak for others, but the not to exceed number, even if we assume 6 participants, might be a little difficult for us at our scale to participate. Not devaluing the learnings and your point about not having to come back to the CC Power Board for additional allocations and setting it up in that. But I'm just wondering, are there any, and perhaps this is in some of the more detailed information, but are there any milestones that are contemplated? And I mean, I know that the subcommittee will be working on these issues, but how would that come back to the board so that we could potentially make some course corrections, or maybe there's some off ramps if it really doesn't seem like it's going to be something that is fruitful. Just wondering if you've put any thought to that.
Yeah, so 2 things. One is currently we're proposing to cost share equally for the phase 2A, as you see. Director Sears, you raise a really good point that has come up from the resource planning working group, which is that if someone's only buying, say, 5% of a project versus 20%, is it appropriate for them to bear the same costs, and how do we deal with that? I think what I heard loosely from the resource planning working group is for phase 2A, where everyone's sort of getting the option to see the information and participate and get the option to join, it's okay. But then once we get to phase 2B, where we have visibility to the levels of participation, the 5% versus the 20%, we'll need a methodology to right size the costs for everyone based on their participation. So I just wanted you to know that we are aware of that, and that this, particularly the 5 case, is a very significant number for a lot of CCAs, and so we don't take it lightly. We have not contemplated if there's sort of a mid phase 2A off ramp that we would take. I think our plan loosely was to work with the project advisory subcommittee and really have them be in control though. So if there's a moment where we think we're not getting the results we want, we could work with them to reduce or stop the spending at that point. Unfortunately, if you go to the further down slide, you see though that we want to design the pro forma templates, and all that needs to go into the solicitation so that members can so that bidders can give conforming bids. So there is going to be some amount of money spent up front before we even run the solicitation, just to make sure the solicitation is successful. So it'll be hard to spend no dollars too early, if I'm saying that correctly. Philippe, anything you wanted to add about sort of cost controls?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that there may be some range in the costs attributable to the diversity of different desires amongst the members that increases the cost. But in general, these cost estimates reflect the delivery of a product that has a fixed cost associated with, say, the pro forma agreements, optionality, increasing costs relating to different technologies upon that, which as you get more members may scale the cost higher. But the cost of any individual member pursuing this type of effort on their own should be roughly in line with the range of estimates that we're presenting here that wouldn't be entailed if CC Power does this on behalf of all members. When we get to the phase 2B, as Alex mentioned, the nature of the cost comes down to costs of negotiation and of actual bond issuance, and the relative benefit attributable to those costs will vary based upon the proportion amount of offtake that each individual member participating in that is going to realize from that procurement effort. And so to Alex's point, that's where we see that it does make more sense to look to allocate those higher costs more on the basis of what ultimately is being procured. If that helps.
Yeah, recognize that, and I appreciate the feedback there. So just on that last point, the 2B, I assume that would be a decision point, a sort of go, no go for each of the individual members, and then based on that, if it's a go, then what percentage is desirable or desired by that particular entity. What I'm not super clear about here on this slide, and why I wanted to come back to it too, is you've heard my concerns about the sort of cost of entry. But what I'm not entirely sure about is what the low versus the high sort of buys us. I realize it's more information. It's a deeper dive. I think, Alex, you mentioned that perhaps the solicitation looks a bit different under the lower or even a moderate scenario. I'm sure some things sort of fall in between these two. But can you characterize that a little bit more for me?
Yeah, I can jump in there, Alex.
Go ahead, please.
So as far as the solicitation, these are reflective of quotes from different vendors that range in terms of their level of expertise in supporting this type of procurement, and how on the high end, basically doing more of the activities versus on the low end, perhaps not doing quite as much, say putting valuation on CC Power and its members. And so there's the range of outcomes associated there. With respect to engineering support, the council costs, those variabilities come down to the amount of back and forth that's ultimately going to be required to prepare documentation for the solicitation based upon the range of desired technologies to be considered, and how much input all of the different members want to have into the development of these agreements. The more back and forth, the higher the legal costs, and therefore that could kind of push things up to that higher range.
Sure.
Given that this is all the first time in pursuing the BTA for the members, we again wanted to propose seeking the higher amount so that we're able to reflect the interests of all the members, pursue potentially different technologies, and have that flexibility. But again, we'll look to try to streamline and be cognizant of costs throughout this process. And ultimately, that's going to come down to members looking to align upon what they desire collectively.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Yeah, and at the bottom it shows this will all be tracked in a balancing account too. So, this is not money that goes into the G&A account for CC Power. This will sort of stay tagged to whomever the participants of the project are. So it's really their money, and any money that doesn't get spent can kind of flow back to them or offset other project costs.
Okay, let's go to, is that Director Balachandran?
Yeah, we actually have two, one from me and one from Rob.
Okay.
So I have a few comments to make. One is I do appreciate Director Sears's comment on one member, one share here, and that may be something to look at. However, just like we did with the long duration storage, the first time we're doing it, there's a bunch of money that we have to spend. And the IRA and these opportunities are going to be available to us for another 15 years. So some of the work that we're doing today is going to benefit us in future iterations if we think this is valuable, and I expect the cost would come down there. However, I would like to just, double click General Manager Morris. I think the comments on informing us about costs, informing us about different decisions you're making, and also add, if there aren't too many responses to the RFP, maybe leaning on sweat equity to do some of the analysis. So I want to give you the maximum flexibility on this, so I'm comfortable with where the costs are going and the range. So I'll be voting for this. So the question I have actually is on your project advisory committee. Can you tell me a little bit more about who would be participating in that?
Yeah, so great question, Chair, and thank you. I also hear you on sort of providing as much transparency as possible and sweat equity, which we have looked at, by the way, as a way to save money. So originally, and General Counsel Isles, you may have historical information that's relevant because we used to have a project oversight committee model, or POC. As CC Power has grown and matured, we've evolved to a project advisory subcommittee model where participants in the project who've signed the cost sharing agreement sort of actively participate, and that becomes sort of the chief advisory body for the project. So every participant in the project would have a seat on that table. Now, there's always a question of how do we make decisions as a group? What we've used, and I see, future Director Padilla behind you. So, there's a lot of history here about how do we make decisions as a group? And certainly I think the default strategy is to pursue a consensus approach. And then if we can't do that, what do we do? And we're actually, developing policies for how we resolve that. And then further, once people sign on to the cost sharing agreement, General Counsel Isles, we have historically started to detail sort of decision-making criteria inside those operations. So once you go into a project like this, or at least a preliminary project, there's criteria that can be established specifically to govern the project itself. Anything you would think to add or clarify, General Counsel?
Yeah, I would just clarify, it is still an informal body just solely of staff. So while we do have the cost sharing agreements and any provisions in there, it is ultimately up to the board to make certain decisions. An example of this is this resolution that we're bringing forward.
Perfect. So I want to clarify the resolution too. We'll be, and whenever we're ready, I'm ready to make a motion to move this. The resolution is looking at, all of us would vote on it, right? If we want to participate, that's a different sign up. This is just for allowing CC Power to go forward with this. Okay, I'm seeing head nods. No problem.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. Alex, I think Girish got to a lot of my points. I'm really supportive of the approach and even of the budget, because I think you need to have the flexibility to manage the project. I understand, if we're going to be spending to learn, doing it collectively is a good format in which to do that. But as we move forward, it's sort of being mindful of Director Sears' approach. And I know you'll take this on with your work with the working group and advisory groups, managing to that cost differential. So we're exploring this because, you're estimating somewhere of like $500,000 difference between a PPA versus a build own transfer approach. So managing, your project management to deliver this as close to that as possible, because we can look at them as learning benefits. I always think of them as learning cost, and that the ultimate comparison is at the end of the day, how does that compare? And that's what I'll be looking at the end of it. But I'm supportive of it as well, and I just appreciate all the work that's gone into this from you and the working groups.
Yeah, and I want everybody to know, we really understand and are mindful that this is a lot of money, and we want to be super responsible with how we use it. We want to achieve all these goals and the learning goals and objectives. The phase 2A versus high versus low is sort of designed to give you a bookend feel. And if there's sort of interim controls we can bring up or a clearer project plan, we're very happy and supportive of doing that. One of the first questions though is who would want to participate? Because once we know that, we'll work with them and develop that plan in a way that fits their needs. So what this does today is it sort of gives us the authorization. We'll see who wants to join, and then those people are really, those members would be sort of overseeing this work, and we will work directly with and for them on designing something that works for them.
So I want to pause and check and see if we have enough to make a decision. Is anybody feel they're squared up enough to make a motion? I just want to test the waters on that.
Yep, I'm ready to make a motion.
That's Silicon Valley. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is to support.
Then before I turn to public comment, let me just check in with the board then. Is there any other burning things we want to answer before anyone votes?
Just a clarification. So it's approval of the approach plus the budget in one motion.
As is.
Yes, but your commitment to being a part of it is not. In other words, this is a template budget, in my opinion, or that's kind of the language I would think of it in as. And then it only gets activated if members sign up to be part of it. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, can we get general counsel's with that? Thank you.
Yeah, so this resolution is just essentially approving this project, moving forward with this project as within the power and purpose of CC Power, and approving a budget, because the board has to approve even project budgets that are only being applied to project participants. So a vote on this resolution is not a commitment to participate in the project. That'll be handled separately through a cost sharing agreement. So this is essentially just, is this within CC Power's purpose, and should we move forward with it?
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn to public comment at this time. So, do we have any members who wish to comment on this item, 6E? Not seeing any hands, so let's call the roll.
Okay, for resolution 240104, Ava Community Energy is absent. Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes,
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority is absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you, everyone. So we are going to head into closed session. Before we do that, I'm going to check for public comment on closed session. And so the items we'll be discussing are public employee performance of our general manager. And this second part, I think, is a legal way of expressing the same thing, in my opinion. Is that correct, General Counsel? Conference with labor negotiator? Okay, yes. So I want to check and see if there's any public comment before we head into closed session, and then I'll have a little short administrative comment about how we switch over to closed session next. So, and I think we just lost our last public member. So I don't see any hands, and I know our team will let us know if we got any written materials. So we'll be heading into closed session. Recall that you all have a second link, and you need to get out of this Zoom meeting and click on that other link. So what I'd like to do is allow us, 5 minutes for that transition, because it might take somebody a minute to find that link. And remember, we need you to come back, because there actually is a short report out from closed session that we're expecting. So,
and can we be reminded, Chair, who sent that link so we can find it easier?
Yeah, it was sent from Amy Freeman around 1:30 p.m. yesterday.
Thank you.
So let me just see several people thumbs upping that they found the link before we get off. I got 2, 3, 4. All right, we're getting critical mass. Okay, I will see you there. Let's make it more like 3 minutes from now. So we'll see you there just in a few minutes. Thanks, everyone. So we will adjourn this meeting and give the report out in the next meeting in February. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.